Narcissistic relationships are death by 1,000 cuts. It's often not the big betrayals that bring people down in these relationships, though obviously it can be, but it's often these accumulated micro injuries. Being dismissed almost whenever you share about yourself. Being treated with contempt when you share emotion. Little by little, you are indoctrinated and shaped into cutting more and more of yourself off. So today we're going to talk a little bit about gaslighting, okay? And all of you know the broad strokes of gaslighting and the steps of gaslighting and denying reality and telling you that something's wrong with you and doing that over and over again until you're a shell of yourself, right? But there's a form of gaslighting that a lot of people sometimes miss, and they even miss it as gaslighting and wonder why it's leaving them so off balance. One form of gaslighting is being told that you're incompetent and can't do stuff. And if that has ever happened to you, that somebody's just told you things you know you can do, and they tell you you can't, drop that in the comments, because you may not have recognized, because that's not the reality. You know how to do this thing. But telling you that you're incompetent is a denial of reality. It's gaslighting. If it's happened to you, drop it in the comments and let's talk about it. Narcissistic relationships are spaces where we feel deeply insecure. There's no getting away from that. Over time, the longer the amount of time we're in these relationships, we doubt our judgment more and more. We don't believe we know how to say the right thing, do the right thing, be the right thing. Our confidence erodes in these relationships over time. Many people at the beginning of these relationships, we're not all shrinking violets. Really strong people get into these relationships. They're very confident people, people who are at the top of their game. But once the narcissist was done with them, they were shells of themselves, riddled with self-doubt, lost confidence, lost self-esteem, and confusion. When we talk about gaslighting, we often focus on the simple examples of them denying reality. Your reality, all reality. They deny you said what you said, did what you did, feel what you feel. And then they top that off by telling you that you're stupid or crazy. It's something that happens over and over again, a slow grooming process and indoctrination. And before long, you stop believing in yourself and are completely under the sway of the gaslighter. As a result of this, lots of people hold themselves back in life. They hold themselves back from opportunities in education, in jobs, and just life and love in general. Because we frame gaslighting as the experience of having reality denied, we miss an important form of gaslighting that really harms people. And it is a denial of reality, but in a different way. The narcissist tells you that you are not able to do stuff. What stuff? Any stuff. You don't know how to drive there. You don't know how to cook that. You don't write well enough to go to graduate school. You're not able to travel alone. You won't be able to take care of a dog. You aren't capable of running your own business. Do you really think that you're going to be able to work and raise kids? I don't think you're going to qualify to get a loan to buy a property. Time and time again, it is a doubting of your competence. Over and over again, they tell you that you are not capable. It is a denial of reality, especially if you actually know how to do the thing that they are accusing you of. The initial feelings and reactions to this are often hurt. And if you react, you say, yes, I do. I know how to cook, or I write really well, or I've driven in all kinds of places, or I grew up with pets, or I used to run a business, whatever. Then they will gaslight you more. They'll say, oh, okay, stop being so sensitive, or stop being so arrogant. You have a very high-headed sense of what you can do. Or then they go with, I think you're being crazy with how intense you're being. Yeesh, I was just trying to give you some constructive feedback and protect you, and you go crazy on me. So there's no having these conversations, because now, after having that conversation, not only are you incompetent, now they're calling you insane. What's unfortunate is that early in these relationships, people may perceive that the narcissist is being solicitous. Oh, you don't know how to drive in that big city or so far. And then the rationalization is, oh, they just don't want something bad to happen to me on that long drive, or they just want to take care of me. Or when they say, well, you're not going to be able to cook all of that for all those people, oh, they're just protecting me. They don't want me to exhaust myself having to cook for their family. Part of why gaslighting works is that it is a grooming process that happens early and takes place alongside love bombing or familiarity. People often want it to work out with a new person, or they want to believe that even a familiar person like their parent has their best interests at heart. We, as people, want to trust, and sadly, after a narcissistic relationship, that is a hard horse to get back on again. But over time, after being told we can't, or we shouldn't, or we won't be able to, if you hear that enough, you do start doubting yourself without the gaslighter or the narcissist even having to doubt you out loud. You believe it. And that is the gaslighting working. You stop taking chances. You stop suggesting new things. You hold yourself back. You turn inward. You live less fully. And then the narcissist wins because you are living under their control. Ironically, and this is often the tragic final act of these relationships, after you have been told so repeatedly that you can't do anything and that you are incompetent and you even stop trying, the narcissistic person may then start getting bored with you or behaving as though you are not interesting. Now, this isn't a bad thing. If they head out, it's kind of a good thing, and you can right away start trying things again and taking your life back. But sadly, some people view that as an abandonment when the narcissist leaves them. A healthy relationship is one in which growth is encouraged, in which taking chances is encouraged, in which trying new things is encouraged. Because healthy people aren't threatened by their partners and they want them to succeed. So when you say you want to go to graduate school later in life, they encourage it. Or you want to start selling your delicious pies, they applaud you for it, may even help you with it. It's what a relationship is supposed to look like. Telling you that you can't do the things that you are able to do is an insidious form of gaslighting. It doubts the reality of your competence and over time erodes whatever sense of competence you had in the first place. The first time someone suggests you can't do something or shouldn't do something, don't get into a fight, but instead say, interesting suggestion. And if you don't mind, I need to get to that cabinet because I'm going to go ahead and start cooking the dinner, or taking the drive, or taking the class. Clipping people's wings is a daily practice for narcissistic people. It's a way of keeping us stuck alongside them and takes away the threat that we could run away from them. But please do not allow anyone, narcissistic or not, to erode your sense of what you can do or what you can attempt. If you are coming out of a narcissistic relationship, one of the most important things you can do is to start picking up on the things you were told you can't do. So go ahead and host that dinner party, take that long road trip, get that puppy, start looking into running that business, turn that gaslight off by being competent. If you are still stuck in the narcissistic relationship, do that silent act of rebellion technique I have talked about. Work silently toward a goal, but don't share it with the narcissist, or they will invalidate it or dismantle it before you even get to start it. I don't know, look into taking that online class. Make a meal for friends when the narcissist is not home. Get the part-time volunteer position while the children are at school. Just do it quietly. It's meant to be a way to remind yourself of your incompetence. Of the many losses that narcissists have inflicted on the world, one of the greatest is reflected in the lost potential of human beings who have been stuck in these relationships and never really got to enact all the things they could do. I think of the novels we haven't read, the scientists whose work we didn't get to see, the performers who never performed, the food we didn't eat, the music we didn't hear. Because a narcissist stole that belief in their abilities or possibility from them. One of the most powerful paths of healing is to take yourself back and mentally tell them to go F themselves by doing all of the things they told you that you couldn't do. Don't let this form of gaslighting get you. Never let someone tell you that you can't do something, especially when you know you can. Their projected insecurity can be dangerous. Don't make their shame and sense of inadequacy yours. Don't let their fear of abandonment, which encourages them to clip your wings so you can never leave, hold you back. The world needs to hear and see your gifts and those of many people who have been gaslighted and told that they don't know what they're doing. A bad worker always blames their tools. You may or may not have heard this proverb, but this one actually has some pretty old origins, as all of these do. This one is traced to the 13th century French. I could not find a particular author associated with this. And then back then, the way that phrase translated from the French was that basically a bad tradesperson can never find the right tool. Now, I think you understand what the saying means, right? It makes sense at the face of it. If a person is unskilled, and on top of that is also uninsightful or lacks self-reflective capacity, they blame the lack of a tool rather than their own inability or their own irresponsibility. It's a bit like victimhood mixed with blame. So when we take this proverb, a bad worker blames their tools, we take this one and we elevate it beyond the tools. Really what it's saying, it's a glimpse at the blame deflection that is a central core of narcissism. Narcissists have a very hard time taking responsibility or blame, so they push it out. So just like that bad worker who blames the shoddy work on a lack of tools or blames their inability to fix something on not having the right tool, the narcissistic personality will blame everyone in their lives for the mistakes that they make. People with this personality style blame others for their failures, for their disappointments, for their stress, for their frustrations. This makes these relationships incredibly challenging because you're constantly being blamed for their issues. In fact, in the early conversations with a narcissistic individual, when you first meet them, you will actually find yourself trying to engage with their blaming. You'll say things like, I didn't do that. That's not my fault. No, really, I'm not the one who did that. And on and on and on. You know where that goes. Now, really, at these times, reality doesn't matter to them at those times with those personality styles. Reality doesn't matter to people who are narcissistic. It's all about them being able to cast blame out so they can maintain their grandiose and perfectionistic version of themselves. I don't make mistakes. It's everybody else's fault. The bad sales presentation wasn't their fault. It was the client's fault for rescheduling. It was the assistant's fault for not getting the materials organized on time. It was their partner's fault for not keeping the house quieter while they were preparing for the sales presentation. It's everybody else's fault. And that blame deflection is a classical element of these relationships, the proverbial bad tools. The blame projection and deflection of the narcissistic relationship, honestly, for a lot of people who go through these relationships, is one of the most exhausting, destabilizing, confusing, and manipulating parts of these relationships. Sort of them not being able to find their tools and blaming everyone else often means that other people end up taking too much responsibility, even for things that they are not responsible for. So the person who's not the narcissist takes on all the responsibility. It's not their responsibility. And because of taking all this responsibility for things you didn't even do, that can really result to holding on to negative emotions like guilt and self-blame. And over time, if you spend enough time with a person who's narcissistic, they don't even have to blame you after a while. You get so indoctrinated into their way of thinking that you self-blame before they can blame you. It's almost like after a while, you just sort of cut out the manipulative middleman and you do it to yourself. Sometimes people who find themselves in narcissistic relationships. Now, whether this is a family of origin relationship, whether this is an intimate relationship or a workplace relationship, they will try and overcompensate by making sure that everything is hyper controlled. So you're in a relationship with a narcissistic individual. You might try to compensate by making sure everything's very controlled, very organized. This can be exhausting. People in these relationships will find themselves almost at an obsessive and almost compulsive level of trying to control the environment, of trying to control their own words or their own behaviors enough. So the possibility of activating the blame-shifting tirade in the narcissist is minimized. And then you just keep appeasing and enabling the narcissist. You've got the house so organized that if they're like, it's your fault I couldn't find the scissors are exactly where they need to be. It's really difficult because to steer clear of being blamed by someone else who is clearly not taking responsibility means that you have to work on your own sense of self-assurance, to be clear and aware on what you are responsible for, to be clear and aware of what you're not responsible for, and understand that some of it is gray and that there is shared responsibility. The narcissistic individual is engaged in a very unconscious and a very primitive process of projection and offloading of shameful or uncomfortable deficits that they don't want to have to keep stirring in themselves. And so they project them onto other people. And the narcissistic disconnection from empathy actually means it's easier to blame others because you don't stop to think, they don't stop to think, how would someone feel if I blame them for this when they're not really responsible? The challenge is that the blame shifting is also often coupled with victimization and a sense of persecution. A person who is narcissistic will say, I can't find the right tool, and that's because nobody supports me having the right tools, or they hide my tools. Things like, I screwed up the sales presentation because people are out to get me, and nobody believes in me or wants to support me. That self-victimization is such a classical piece of the narcissistic personality style. So whomever was this frustrated French writer who watched people do a lousy job and blame other people actually did a really nice job of capturing this dynamic of the bad worker blaming their tools and clearly telling us that this is a part of what human behavior and difficult human behavior and what some people do and have always done for hundreds of years, not taking responsibility and then blaming something or someone else for their failings. But it's always best in these blame-shifty times not to engage or to engage minimally. If they blame you for something that is clearly really something you didn't do, you just nod politely and just say a gentle, okay. Document when needed, and then recognize that they're never going to listen to your version of the events. Some people say, it's unjust, it's unjust. Why shouldn't they hear that I'm not the one responsible? It is unjust, and they aren't listening. In your narcissistic relationship, what happened when you might have been in a group and you were sharing some of your goals, some of your aspirations, some of your dreams, or even something good that happened to you? What did the narcissistic person do? For how many of you were you told that you were just merely sharing a piece of information? Oh, I got a small promotion a couple weeks ago. And you were told that you were showing off? Let's break that down because it happens more often than you think. I mean, it's not a good feeling when all you're doing is sharing something very basic. Oh, something good happens to you, whatever it is. Like I said, maybe you get a small promotion at work, or you got some meaningful praise for something good that you did. Whatever it is, it may be big, it may be small, and you share it with other people because it feels good, because you're happy, because something good happened, right? Or maybe you do something like you share an aspiration. Perhaps you hold on to an aspiration that you want to go to graduate school or law school, or you hope to launch your own business someday, or engage in some kind of a creative endeavor that you've always dreamt of, like writing a book or something like that. You may also have an experience of seeing something. Maybe, for example, I don't know, there's a TV show that features a city that you've traveled to or a restaurant that you ate at. And you make a comment, a passing comment. You say, oh my gosh, that's so neat. I've seen that when I went there. Just sweet, like the observations we make about our lives when we feel connected to things. Or maybe someone is sharing a story in a group you're in, and you listen to it, and then you can relate to it through personal experience. You let them tell their whole story, and you might say, oh yeah, I know that place. I've been there. You just sort of connect to them. So you understand kind of what I'm talking about is, whatever it is I'm talking about, it's a sort of a circumstance where it is not crazy bragging, and I'm not talking about a circumstance where you're talking over someone or hijacking a conversation. In this situation, I'm really talking about circumstances in which you're just sharing a piece of good news, or you might be sharing a goal that you have down the road, or you might be sharing a piece of information of something that happened in your life that's related to what someone else is sharing, right? Get the backdrop here? So then the narcissistic person in your midst will shut it down and say, oh my gosh, you're showing off, a little bit of eye rolling, right? I am certain that many of you have experienced this, that you simply want to share something good or interesting or compelling from your life, and you do it appropriately, and it gets shut down. This may be something that has been happening to you since you were young, and you had a narcissistic parent or parents, and perhaps you shared some good news, and were told by your parents or someone else in the family, oh golly, now just stop showing off. Or you were in a narcissistic relationship as an adult, and you may share something, any of these things I'm talking about, and be told that you're an attention seeker, or, oh my gosh, you need so much validation. Now, this kind of wing clipping can happen repeatedly to the point that many people in narcissistic relationships kind of get ahead of it and slowly start cutting their own wings and stop sharing about themselves. I have been struck in my own clinical work with clients how often clients experiencing narcissistic abuse had some really cool stuff happen in their lives, and they don't even really bring it up in the session. And when they finally do, it's like an afterthought, or they're bashful, or as though they're embarrassed. And when I'm kind of jumping up and down, I'm so excited for them, they play it down and say, ugh, it's not that big a deal. I know that dance, and I recognize it's happening. And it's very likely that at other times in their lives, when they have shared their good news or hopes or aspirations, that they have been shut down. Narcissistic relationships are death by 1,000 cuts. It's often not the big betrayals that bring people down in these relationships, though obviously it can be, but it's often these accumulated micro-injuries. Being dismissed almost whenever you share about yourself, being treated with contempt when you share emotion. Little by little, you are indoctrinated and shaped into cutting more and more of yourself off. People who have been in severely narcissistically abusive relationships for long periods of time, they look silenced over time, sometimes almost hunched over, rarely sharing about themselves. And when they do, or it's discovered by other people that they've done something really great or interesting, the people in these narcissistic relationships sort of shut it down, say, oh, it wasn't that big a deal. Narcissistic people may actually be arrogant enough to say things like, pride goeth before a fall, apparently for everyone but them. Now, you're all watching this channel smart enough to know that a lot of what is at play here is jealousy and insecurity. The narcissistic person can't stand the idea of anyone else succeeding or getting attention from others or stealing this spotlight, not that that was what you're trying to do. And on top of that, your success very likely is triggering their insecurities as well. But the why that it happens, we know why it happens with them. It's not as important as the long-term impacts on you. Because when this happens enough, you lose your voice, you lose your sense of self-advocacy, and you lose that healthy sense of pride. I have watched people just stop sharing about themselves. And these were people who were a hell of a lot more interesting than the narcissistic people who had been around them and were clipping their wings. When I found out later some of the amazing things that these people had done and asked, why didn't you share this? This is amazing. They'd usually shrug it off and say, ugh, whatever, it's not that big a deal. These relationships shape identity because believing that something that you aspire to or have accomplished, or just as a shared experience you have with others, you're told it's not important. You're told that you're not important. And over time, that leads to self-devaluation and can even lead you to holding yourself back. It's so crucial to understand that these patterns are a thing and that they emanate, again, largely from the narcissistic folks' insecurity, as well as their need to leave other people feeling as bad and empty as them, though that part isn't conscious. But these experiences shape us, especially if they happen to you as a child. When you were repeatedly told you were to be seen and not heard, that to be prideful was wrong, but in the same breath, you would see that narcissistic parent self-aggrandize and always make it about themselves. This pattern also leaves many survivors wondering if they are showing off. Like, am I sort of being an arrogant, braggy person? Or even wondering, am I the narcissist? And because of that, it can magnify the self-blame, the confusion, the self-doubt, and the many other things that happen to people in narcissistic relationships, all of which ultimately leave us constantly questioning ourselves. There are many ways that narcissistic relationships slowly steal yourself from yourself. And this is one of them. This idea that you ever speaking about things that are relevant to you, that's somehow braggy, attention-seeking, or prideful. You, after being in a narcissistic relationship, clearly know the difference between sharing and showing off. It's hard, but the hard work is not letting them get into your head and understanding that this is one of the many abusive tricks that shows up in these relationships. It's important you share the wonderful things that happen to you and the things you share with others. This is how we create social connections. This is how you learn to advocate for yourself. And this is how you get to hear the validation from the healthy people in your midst, rather than the constantly being shutting down. But when it happens enough, it gets really, really hard. It's almost like touching a hot stove. You do it enough, you're never going to do it again. And over time, you learn that sharing the good things about your life is always going to get you shut down. Consider it a conscious effort to keep doing that, to try to share those things with safe people, and slowly lean into yourself and recognize that not only do you have a right to share these things, it's important that you do, because healthy people want to hear it. Let's face it, probably one of the main fallouts of being in a relationship with a narcissist is feeling like we're not enough. I have heard that so many thousands of times. And in the majority of cases, it's from people who either grew up with a narcissistic parent or are currently or in the past have been in a narcissistic relationship. So I'm going to share with you, and this was really culling over my notes and things I've worked on over the years, the 10 reasons why we feel, well, a narcissistic relationship leaves us feeling like we're not enough. And if you have more than 10, please add them to the comments. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe and join us. So let's talk about this. Why, the 10 reasons why we feel like a relationship with a narcissist leaves us feeling like we're not enough. Because really, I am not enough is the mantra of the survivor of narcissistic abuse. You say it all the time or you feel it all the time. So let's break down the 10 reasons why this happens in a narcissistic relationship. Reason number 1, they tell you you're not enough. We might as well get the simplest reason out of the way first, right? They may literally say to you things that are as awful as, I could do better than you, or other people's children do so much more for their parent than you do, or things like, Why can't you make more money? So whatever little tiny bit of frontal lobe chip or big piece of frontal lobe inhibition they're missing, they just say, narcissists just say what they want. And because of their lack of empathy, they actually don't care how much those statements hurt you. Reason number 2, you feel like you're not enough in a narcissistic relationship, they regularly compare you to other people. These comparisons can be subtle or just in your face. They may literally compare your appearance or your accomplishments or your behavior or anything about you to somebody else. This is the parent who pits the kids against each other. The scapegoat knowing that they were never going to measure up against the golden child. And the parents sort of set this up as some sort of sibling cage fight. Narcissists triangulate in the workplace. They basically tell you that you aren't as good at something as someone else, which puts you, obviously, in a very diminished position, which is great. It's all the better to control you. And obviously, if you're in a relationship, they'll often say, well, such and such's wife does so much more than you do. Number 3, they gaslight you. When we are gaslighted, we go to a place of assuming we are the ones that are wrong, we are the ones that are mentally ill, maybe we ourselves are narcissistic, forgetful, losing our memory, paranoid. When this happens enough, when we're gaslighted enough, we find ourselves in a really destabilized position because we doubt ourselves and we become confused. And in that state, we believe that we're lacking something. And obviously, that we're not enough. In fact, if we're gaslighted enough, we feel like, I'm so lucky that this person wants to be with me, because who would want to be with someone who's as confused and crazy as I am? Number 4 reason we feel not enough in these relationships. Narcissists only pay attention to you when it's convenient for them. After the initial idealization of your relationship with them becomes a distant memory, the narcissist may pay attention to you only if they need something. Sex, attention, validation, a sandwich, a clean shirt, or because they need to take a holiday picture. But you start to recognize that basically they hold you in the same esteem as they do the coffee maker in your kitchen. When we feel as though we do not exist to someone else unless we are relevant to them, that can push us to feel as though we are not enough. Reason number 5 we don't feel enough in these relationships because they don't listen to us. One of my favorite narcissistic ploys that I've observed is how they so often walk around saying that they have ADHD. So that's why they can't pay attention to you. But interestingly, narcissists who say they have ADD often have more than enough attention span to yammer on about their own lives or to stare at Instagram for 6 consecutive hours. Being in the presence of someone who does not hear you, who does not see you, is dehumanizing, and it contributes very much to this feeling of being not enough. The 6th reason is they say weird, manipulative stuff like, nobody will ever love you the way I do. That is a classical narcissistic ploy that oddly, it's supposed to feel special, but it is actually devaluing. Why wouldn't somebody love me as much as you do? Why wouldn't someone love you as much as this person says they do? You're wonderful. Someone else would see your wonderfulness too. Those kinds of subtle, passive-aggressive digs over time leave you feeling like you are lucky that they're even with you, leaving you feel like you're not enough. Reason number 7 is narcissists have contempt for all of us. Contempt is a soul killer, and it is a classical dynamic in narcissistic relationships. They have contempt for your interests, contempt for your preferences, and in some cases, they just have contempt for you. They look at you with disgust. And that can come out in a million invalidating ways, from just a sneering rejection of you to a sense of snobbery, or just a world that has been created in your life with them in which you just often feel stupid. When you are in the face of someone who is contemptuous, I can guarantee you will feel like you're not enough. The eighth reason we don't feel enough is how much time narcissists get lost in social media. They either covet the life of other people or inappropriately covet other people. For example, they might like images from inappropriately young or inappropriately underdressed men or women when they are already in a relationship themselves. They think that people covet their own lives and their fancy images of their lives, and they give the best of themselves to this artificial universe of social media and nothing to their real life. Sometimes they'll say it's under the guise of, I'm on social media because it's work, it's for my brand. You will then wonder why a random gal in Miami is getting more regard from your partner than you, and you wonder if that's part of their job description. And a partner choosing this alternate and false universe of social media feels negating and contributes to feeling, yep, you got it, not enough. Reason number 9 we often feel like we're not enough with the narcissist is that sometimes they cheat on us. Now, not all narcissists cheat, but when they do, many people struggle with that sense of, I must not be enough, because if I was, they would have stayed with me. Or if I'd been enough, they wouldn't have needed to stray or wander. What's interesting is narcissists cheat because they are validation seeking, novelty seeking, entitled, and lack empathy. Actually, they aren't even thinking about you and your enoughness when they cheat. They're only thinking about themselves. But it's a common refrain I hear from people who have endured narcissistic relationships. They endure them, they just get cheated on, and they're like, yep, I'm not enough. And reason number 10, we feel like we're not enough in these relationships, is because the narcissists feel like they're not enough. And that right there is the core issue. In some ways, what they are doing, in most ways, is what they're doing, is projecting their sense of being not enough, that unresolved sense for them, and they project it on everyone around them. The narcissist's insecurity is buried deep, deep inside, and they are not in touch with it. Never, ever, ever, ever tell a narcissist that they are insecure. They will bite your hand off faster than a lion could. But their unresolved, undetected insecurity and their internal sense of not enoughness is consistently projected on other people. Sadly, so many of us internalize it when we're in the presence of a narcissist, but it's their stuff. Let them hold on to it. And when you can get there, perhaps you can see it, their not enoughness, their sense of insecurity. Perhaps one day you'll see it from a lens of compassion from a distance and slowly cultivate other, healthier spaces in your life. For people who grew up with narcissistic parents, the theme of not enough is a legacy issue, one that got shaped by a parent or parents who were unavailable, inconsistent, manipulative, abusive, or who felt not enough themselves and projected that into their child. And all of that gets integrated into the child's identity. When the not enough script has early origins, it's much harder to shake, and sadly can result in a sort of unconscious drift to choosing and enduring a narcissistic and difficult partner. However, I don't believe that this is our destiny to forever feel not enough. I think that loud chorus of voices so many of us hear in our heads telling us we are not enough, at a minimum, we can turn the volume down. Will those whispers of not enoughness probably always last? Yeah. But at some point, we can recognize that they are merely the broken voices of other people we have internalized. And one day you might feel brave enough to just reach in, pull them out, and silence them once and for all. I'm a big believer that people are enough by dint of their existence, by dint of just getting through the days. And this idea of not enoughness has very wide, deep roots. But these are probably the top 10 reasons why people in narcissistic relationships so often feel like they're not enough. I hope that's helpful. And if you have any other reasons, please drop them in the comments. Thanks again.